May I now request General Anil Chauhan, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, SM, VSM, Chief of the Defense Staff, to deliver the special lecture on Future Wars and Warfare.
Vice Chancellor of Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Dr. Suresh Gosavi, Pro Vice Chancellor Shri Parag Kalkar, Professor Vijay Khare, Dr. Charushila Kayake. I can see a lot of serving officers, NCC cadets, former officers, especially from my regiment, my battalion. I also see a lot of students, people from the media. Good afternoon to all of you. As said, I'll be talking about future wars and warfare. Obviously, when you talk about the future, you have to look at a little bit in the past and reflect on what's happening in the present. Then only can you talk and predict about the future. So what I'll do is, I'll talk about the past, and to help me in that, I'll take the help of von Clausewitz, one of the most profound thinkers on warfare. And then, of course, talking about the present, I'll take help of the current operations, Operation Sindoor. And then we'll try and see some kind of a trends which will be there for the future. We all know that war and warfare are synonymous with the political history of mankind, and warfare is as old as human civilization. This is because I think dominance and self-preservation is part of human nature. Any kind of war, I think, has two important elements into it. That is the violence, and this is violence as well as the politics behind violence. So violence is needed for attainment of political objectives. That's regarding imposition of one's wills on the enemy. That I think is important. And politics is, which is said that war is a continuation of politics by other means. So they're not happening in watertight kind of compartments. I will talk about this particular part a bit later. Third important thing which we have learned recently, apart from politics and violence, which are two important constituents of war, is communication. I think this is happening constantly. And this also become an important constituent of war and is an important third element. Any war is characterized by combat, and I think that is important. Combat also has, you can say, 3 or 4 important elements of it, and I'll talk about all these 4 elements. First is the combatant itself, Yodha, Ladne wale. And second is the combat zone, the kind of battlefield you will have. That's the second important thing. Third thing, I think, which is very, very important, is the technology, which shapes warfare. And fourth is, of course, the effect of tactics, of all of this on tactics, or TTPs, which you may also. So war and warfare is always evolving, and it has a binding relationship with technology and politics, and we will talk about it. We all know that the very seminal kind of work on modern kind of warfare was done by von Clausewitz. It is followed by many other great thinkers about warfare, like Jomini, Moltke, Skeffen, Littlehart, etc. In my view, Clausewitz never gave any much importance to technology in warfare, because he was influenced more about political change. That's the time actually French Revolution had taken place. And instead of monarchies, you had seen the birth of republics. So rather than subjects being soldiers and fighting in numbers, you had actually now citizens of a republic. So that were fighting. So these were the kind of, the huge political change in Europe at that particular time. And when he wrote about war, which I to some extent see that it's still relevant, he has spoken extensively about 3 constituents of a war. He called it the Trinity of warfare, and he described this as emotion, chance, and reason. He said that warfare is very, very complex, and this is an interplay between these 3 things. Emotion. Emotion is basically, it's related with people, actually. And this is, people get aroused, they get emotional, and that provides the kind of motivation for governments to act. And there's, of course, also fear. This is another kind of emotion which is worked, and also joy and celebrations if there's victory. So this is the emotion part which is displayed by the people or the population. And second, of course, he's spoken about is reason, which is, of course, the government at that particular moment, because after all, that doesn't get swayed by emotion. It takes a very considered decision that they have to apply now force, a military force, because they have expended all other instruments of national power. So it's a rational kind of a decision, and that's why reason has been attributed always to the government. And then, of course, is chance, which is about the military, the armed forces. That is because war is highly unpredictable. So let me talk about these three things: emotion, reason, and chance, as related to Operation Sindoor. What we see is, in this particular thing which happened at Pahalgam was profound cruelty, of which, towards the victims actually, because all of them were killed with headshots in front of their families and their children, and they were slaughtered in the name of religion, which is kind of unacceptable to this modern world. And this caused a huge revulsion in the society. So there was kind of an hatred. And of course, it revived memories because this is not a single act of terror against India. It means Western nations may have had 1 or 2 acts of terror. It's a continuation of terror acts. And maybe, India has been a victim of the maximum terror acts. Almost 20,000 people have been killed. So amongst the emotion which was being evoked in the people of India was about revenge, retribution, and this was getting to get the perpetrators to justice. So that, I think, was played in everyone's mind. That's a kind of emotional public sentiment which was having. And at the end of it, there was probably some sort of satisfaction, anxiety during the operations, and maybe joy. So this happened during Operation Sindoor. Let me talk about reason. That's what I said that, Clausewitz had attributed reason towards government. And when Operation Sindoor, as far as the government is not concerned, is not about retribution. I think it was about drawing its limits of tolerance, thus and no far. So this state-sponsored terrorism from Pakistan had to stop, and Pakistan should not be able to hold hostage India to terror activities. And of course, it was also said that India is not going to live under the shadow of terror and neither nuclear blackmail. And then also this decision that we need to, since we have laid down a limit, we must act decisively. That, of course, comes out as a natural fallout of this. But there was also a desire in the government that actually it's not getting hyphenated with Pakistan, because we are on a different trajectory and a path towards progress and development. And our aspirations of 1.4 billion people are entirely different from then of our adversary. Our vision is entirely different. And our march of progress should not be stymied. It should be a short kind of a war. I think these are the kinds of reasons for us which I can attribute towards the government. And the nature of conflict we fought and the type of operations that were executed were reflected in that reasoning part of what I just said. Let me now talk about the third important constitution, that is the chance. I said that military operations are highly unpredictable. And you heard that little saying that, no, the best plans actually go out of the window after the first bullet is fired. So, and no operation plan is based on 100% preparedness. You can't be 100% prepared for every kind of a contingency. And you can't have 100% of the information about enemy. So you're always groping in a bit of a dark when you're carrying out military operations. And of course, in every military operation, there is an element of risk involved into it. But the only thing is that there should be a calculated kind of a risk. In this particular case, what I say is, and of course, nations, when they try and build their capabilities, they try and build these capabilities on their past experiences and the kind of future conflicts they'll see they might have to, or the future challenges they may be likely to grapple with. So probably post Balakot and Uri strikes, we thought that should be able to engage targets deep inside with precision strikes. So India built these kind of capabilities. On the other hand, after Balakot, because a large strike package was almost at the borders of Pakistan, so there have been air defense capabilities probably. They built that kind of a stronger. We also thought that we had applied the land domain to carry out surgical strikes after Uri. Then we had applied the air domain, and this time we thought that to maintain that element of surprise, we'll employ one more dimension. That's in the air domain only, but slightly led by using loiter ammunitions and drones, etc., to carry out precision strikes. So when we say if you see both these things, both nations have tried to build different kind of a capabilities. So obviously there's an inherent amount of risk into this. And none of the capabilities that we had acquired actually had been tested in battlefield. They had been tested only in ranges. So whenever we are doing it, there's always an element of risk involved into it. But as they say, you cannot succeed if you don't take that kind of a risk. We knew a little bit that we have a better counter-drone systems, etc. in our country. We have loiter ammunitions. He may not have that kind of a capability, but there's an element of risk into it. I think the second important thing is to understand as to what is a professional military force. When you talk about risks and taking of a chance, actually. I think it's a professional force that is not affected by setbacks or kind of losses, if you may say. Because in war, what is important is, even if there are setbacks, you need to maintain your morale. That morale is to remain high. And then, of course, is adaptability. That is an important constituent of a very professional force. You should be able to understand what went wrong, rectify your mistakes, and go out again. I think that is important for any kind of a professional force. And third is, I think, the offensive spirit. As an organization, you must have that offensive spirit in spite of the initial setbacks. You can't sit down in fear. And as an individual, you should not have any kind of fear. And you should be able to display a high tempo of operations. That is a hallmark of a professional force, and that's a kind of a thing which we displayed. And what I said that in a couple of my interviews, that losses are not important. It's the outcome which is important. So these are the three elements, the trinity of chance, reason, and emotion about warfare. I just tried to explain it in the context of Operation Sindoor. Clausewitz is a profound scholar. He made laid down a couple of other precepts on warfare. I'll take one more and then try and explain this once again. Because there are many postulates of Clausewitz which are still relevant. I've chosen one which is very famous, which is that war is a continuation of policy by other means. If you look at this particular statement, I, as a scholar, as an army officer, draw two important derivatives, conclusions out of this particular statement. One is that war is a finite kind of an entity. That means there is politics, and when you fail in that politics, then you resort to use of force. So then there is war. And when war ends, politics, in the sense negotiations again start. So we have seen that in 71 war, that before that, there's politics, and then there's a 14-day war, and then again you go back to Shimla negotiations. So this is a definite end point and a start point to this activity of war. I think this particular paradigm which Clausewitz has postulated, or the conclusion which we have drawn, is entirely wrong. Today, war is a continuation of 5 C's, which I say as cooperation, competition, confrontation, conflict, and combat. That's war. In one particular sequence, they continue happening. And the state tries to include any kind of instrument which is available to it for achievement of its political objectives, that is diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. You've recently seen this war on trade and tariff, actually. That's basically for attainment of political objectives. So, but this is what I said, in Operation Sindoor also, war and politics was happening as a parallel kind of a phenomenon. And it was being exercised also through communication, which I made a mention initially, both direct and indirect communication. So, second important conclusion, what I draw from the statement which I initially said, that war is a continuation of policy by other means, is that war is a rational decision. That means, and I also spoke about reason when I said about government takes a rational decision about war. And this takes the decision when it is exhausted all its other instruments of power. So, but then the important question comes in, this whole start point of this particular war was this Pahalgam terror attacks. So is terrorism a rational act of warfare? I don't think that's a rational act, because terrorism has no defined logic. It has no politico-military end state. Terrorism is a means and an end in itself. Terrorism is a form of warfare that defines rationality. This is because the terrorist doesn't have anything to lose. He's a non-state actor. So he doesn't have a state. So if he doesn't have a state, he's not worried about territory, people, or the ideology, which form the 3 important constituents of a state. So this is terrorism absolutely irrational if it is happening in a standalone mode. But what happens when, there is about state-sponsored terrorism? Is this rational? Think that, this seems to be a rational decision when state is employing terrorism as an instrument to achieve political objectives. And say like, so it's a reasoned kind of a decision which state takes, and so as our adversary is concerned, he's taken the decision that to bleed India by 1,000 cuts. And when I say that this has been a state policy, this I'm not saying. If you go and look at literature on issues, you'll find Peter Chark, Kristen Fair, who have cited former Director Generals of ISI, explicating this particular strategy as to how they will bleed India by 1,000 cuts. And this particular doctrine is found in various studies in Pakistan, Staff College, Quetta, etc. So this is the normal talk which happens in Pakistan. And of course, officially we know in the 1965, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto declared a 1,000-year war against India when he addressed the United Nations Security Council. And probably Ziaul Haq gave form to this particular doctrine of 1,000 years war. And someone added that you should add this 1,000 cut into it. And similar kind of venom was spewed by General Asim Munir against India and Hindus, speech just few days or weeks before what happened in Pahalgam. So, since this is a rigid decision, it can be also, I believe, that retracted because now Pakistan is faced with a different kind of a prospect that he faces military action in case we find terror happening against us. And also, we said that we'll have water as well as, this thing will not flow together. So we have kind of raised the bar. We have connected terror to water, and we have drawn out new lines for military operations against terror. Sometimes I feel this particular policy also got accentuated after Pakistan acquired nuclear weapons, and they tried to exploit this stability-instability paradox. That's nuclear weapons will provide stability, strategic stability between the two nations. And below that, this terrorism can contain. But of course, what India has done now is there are now two red lines. Between these two red lines is opened up the space for conventional operations. So that's a major change which has happened after Sindoor. Let me talk about rationality once again in the context of Operation Bunyan al-Marsus. Which I said, I've said once, twice earlier that in this whole business of war, warfare, or use of force, the military people are the ones who are most rational, because we understand that, war and warfare is very, very unpredictable. And we also probably understand the consequences of war. So that, I think, is important. So although lost by Pakistan on 10th of May at about 1 a.m. Its aim was to get down India to its knees in 48 hours. Multiple attacks were launched. And in some manner, they have escalated this conflict, which we had actually hit only terrorist targets, but also into the military domain. From their perspective, it would have been rational in the sense they would have said that you used military means to hit these targets. But it was also rational on their part, operation which they thought they'll continue for 48 hours, folded up in about 8 hours. And on 10th, when they picked up the telephone and said they wanted to talk. And I think that the rationale behind this the realization coming in, stem from two facts. That one is they must have assumed that if they continued this mode, they're likely to lose much more. So hence they picked up the telephone. And second thing, since they had stuck us at multiple fronts, they still did not have the benefit of understanding what they had stuck. So they must have thought they must have stuck, and hence there's time to talk now. And if they don't, they'll tend to lose both. So these were the two factors which would have made them to take, but it's only after, say, 1 or 2 days they would have realized that all their kind of attacks which they had launched against us had not fortified, and they had all kind of failed. And so I think this is what had happened. Second thing is, Indian Armed Forces also demonstrated a lot of rationality. We had informed Pakistan on the day we had done these surgical strikes on 7th. We had done it till from 11:05, that's 5, at about 1 o'clock to about 1:30, and at 5 minutes later we had rigged up the Director General of Military Operations to say that we have done this. and we have hit only terror targets. Military establishments have been out of the purview of the strikes, and we have ensured that there are no collateral damage, especially civilians, and we need to talk to each other. So that was, I think, a rational decision. And subsequently, when there was a rhetoric from Pak side, we also said that in case Pakistan hits military establishments, we are going to hit them back, we'll hit them harder, and if they stop, we are going to stop. So when Pakistan did ask for talks and de-escalation, we also at some point of time, not immediately, at some point of time, I would say, did accept what they were saying. So this is what I thought was the political part of war. And now I'll talk about the combat part of war. That's the second part, which I said it had four constituents. That's the combatant, the Yodha, the battlefield, combat zone, where the fight takes place. Talks about technology, and fourth is about tactics. So these are the four things I think important part of warfare. Combatants actually today, earlier we all thought people in uniform, organized military forces are part of combat, but today we have paramilitary forces, mercenaries, contractors, terrorists, jihadis, private companies, big technology. So we had heard about long back about Wagner Group, similarly Blackwater groups. So a lot of security companies provide armed security, mission support, and risk management services, not only to corporate houses, but also governments. So it's not that combatants are only uniformed people paid for by the government. It's different. And today combatants may also include citizens, neutral citizens, or nations, or netizens rather. And they can take part independently or otherwise based on their support to any ideology in cyber warfare, psychological operations, media outreach, etc. So the concept of this war will be only conducted by combatants which are paid for the government is getting diluted slowly. There are other players who are coming into fray. And second thing is this combat zone. This has expanded phenomenally. What we see that not only we have land, air, traditional domains, and the maritime, but we also now have space, cyber, electromagnetic domain. Because a lot of activities took place actually between both of us over 4 days on the electromagnetic domain. Activities also took place in cyber domain. We also had a lot of activities in the domain of perception management, information war, or maybe you can call it cognitive warfare, in which the mindscape, shaping the mind of the people, is more important than the landscape, what happens on land, etc. We also saw the expansion of battle space or the traditional domains. So initially you could see war and warfare, contact warfare, within 5 or 10 kilometers. Today we expanded that battle space phenomenally. When we see the whole length and breadth of Pakistan could be under coverage of India's weapon systems, not for any other ranges, but very, very deliberate precision strikes. Some strikes could be as narrow as 2 meters or 3 meters square, at ranges greater than, say, 300 kilometers. That's what has been demonstrated. So when I said combatants, combat zone, these are the kind of changes which are taking place in future. And I'll dwell upon now the more important part on technology, which I think is becoming very, very important. And the warfare today is at the cusp of, if I could say, a third revolution in military affairs. The first revolution in military affairs was something to do with maneuver warfare, which came about because of advances in ground mobility and air mobility. You could transport people faster. It also was there because of long ranges. The second revolution in military affairs was net-centric warfare, in which battlefield transparency, situational awareness, this became important. Information dominance became important. That came about by the US Armed Forces because of advances in communication technology and computer technologies and ICT. And today we are at the cusp of a third revolution in military affairs, which I have termed as convergence warfare, because what we are seeing is not one technology, but there are a number of technologies which are affecting warfare presently, and they'll happen in future. All of these are heralding a new change in warfare, which is bringing about a change which is disruptive and non-linear. And it's actually occurring at a pace which is unprecedented. And these technologies range from sensor, advanced materials, propulsion, hypersonics, artificial intelligence, big data, advances in cyber, space, all of them. But what happens is generally we take all these advances in technology and consider them as one fact. What I will do is I'll try and identify 4 trends in these technology to see where warfare is progressing further. So the first trend which I talk about is sensor technologies. And this is ushering in a new level of battlefield transparency and situational awareness in the field of warfare. You see, we have natural and man-made sensors. It's a competition between these two, if you have it to say. So we are about 8 billion people on this earth. So we have 16 billion eyes actually as sensors. We're seeing each other. Today we have maybe having more than 8 billion artificial ISR sensors operating. All of us having a mobile phone which has got a camera, you've got a laptop, iPad, etc., which has got a sensor. There are large number of cameras over here. There are sensors of this room which are capturing those images. You go outside on this road, there are a number of sensors over here. There are sensors deployed in air, there are sensors deployed in space, there are sensors deployed undersea, there are sensors deployed in... So it's not only the range of sensors, but the deployment of sensors is much more than what natural way you can do it. It's also the type of sensors. We only had, say, 5 senses, that is touch, hearing, smell, vision, and taste. That's all. But today the kind of sensors we have is seismic, chemical, biological, optical, SAR, infrared, ELINT, AIS, acoustics, ultrasonic, magnetic, electromagnetic, quantum, atomic, radio frequency. So we have overtaken nature actually in numbers, quality, deployment, all everywhere. What is this going to lead us to? This is going to lead us to absolute transparency. So today there cannot be anything like surprise in battlefield. Everything is open. And second thing, I think today when we talk about if there is no surprise, then the only way you can do it by deceiving him probably. You will have to think of different kind of techniques in warfare. The second trend, I think, is related to speed, velocity. I call it celerity. And this segment is driven by advances in hypersonics, whether it is guide or cruise. We saw that BrahMos missile at 2.8 Mach. You can have today missiles at 10, 7, 8 Mach flying. We also have fractional orbital systems. Along with this, what's happening is stealth technologies are coming in. So it becomes very difficult to detect. In any case, we start having drones, which are very, very small, and you can have drones in swarms. So there are no radar systems which are actually made to track large aircrafts moving at a reasonable speed of 1 or 2 Machs. Then you have one hand hypersonic weapons, which are following different kind of trajectories. And on the other hand, you have drones which are as small as this. And do this also means so there are no radars which can actually track it. And then you can move it in swarms, etc. So what's happening is all this in combination, lower radar signatures, high speeds, and intelligent routing, etc., are making these kind of threats invisible, inaudible, undetectable, and hence untargetable. So you're kind of vulnerable everywhere. So on one end, we can see the range of this action. So what you're introducing is kind of non-linearity in ultimate form of non-linearity. You can have a contact battle at 1 or 2 kilometers, and then you can have a battle which is being fought at 300 kilometers or 250 kilometers. So that's the kind of unlinearity, and with impunity you can do it. Because it's very difficult for the opposition to actually devise a system to guard against it or to hit against it unless he's synchronized his systems in a very, very effective kind of a manner. So it's like I said, ultimate non-linearity and expansion of battle space. So it will also probably, maybe we'll have to think of large platforms like large ships, tanks, etc., because these become very vulnerable. And your planning and preparation coordination for such kind of a defensive acts will also require a lot of thought in future. We may have to require a layered kind of a resilient defenses in depth to ward against these kind of threats. The third important trend which I see is something to do with robotics and automation. And this includes unmanned systems, autonomous systems, along with, now you have manned and unmanned only. You'll have one manned aircraft with operating 2 or 3 unmanned aircrafts along with it. One manned tank with 2, 3 unmanned kind of thing, operating in a collaborative kind of an environment. So you also will have exoskeleton system that enhance human performance today. So you can lift up 1 ton of weight because you're having an exoskeletal system. You can run faster than any other human being. So tomorrow you'll have systems like this. So this is going to increase efficiency and reduce human risk during warfare. And hence there'll be a propensity to use force because that human element of warfare that gets reduced. So what's going to happen is in recorded history always there was combat between always 2 human beings. That's what has happened. So there could be, you could be better armed. You could be with a sword, I could be with a lance, you could be with a helmet, I could be with a shield. You could be on a charger, I could be on an elephant. But essentially, the war was between 2 human beings. But today we are at a cusp when war could be between human beings and machines. And tomorrow, it could be between machines and machines. And machines that are autonomous, intelligent, and take decisions. The fourth kind of a trend, which I call is data-centric warfare. That is because of a large amount of advances in technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, large language models, edge computing, etc. So this is going to large amount of data and their data analytics. So what we're going to happen is, when we said, in the second generation warfare, there was net-centric warfare, in which we relied on information superiority over the enemy. Today you're relying on decision superiority. So in a war engagement, if there were 10 decisions to be taken for application of force one after the other, in each and every engagement or decision of mine, I'll be better than yours because this is based on better and better data and decisions. So hence I'll beat every cycle of decision from the adversary. So this would lead to digitization of the battlefield and intelligentization of the battlefield in some manner. And this is going to affect the other 3 elements which I said earlier. Sensors, so that the data from that can be analyzed. Robotics, so that automated kind of a kill chains can be produced. Celerity, speed, because unless things are networked, you'll not be able to pick up things faster. So this is going to produce another kind of a revolution in warfare, which I said will lead to cognitive or decision superiority. So something similar. Green shoots of that were visible in Operation Sindoor. So, of course, there are many other technologies which are impacting warfare. They may be in space, cyber, quantum, many other. But I have just tried to outline 4 important trends in technology. In each of them, there could be hundreds of technologies. And that is going to affect warfare in future. So I said this third revolution in military affairs is known as convergence, because a number of things are converging together to revolutionize warfare. So because it's a convergence of data-centric warfare, celerity, and remote-centric warfare. It's a convergence of kinetic and non-kinetic, including cognitive, into one domain. It's a convergence of first revolution in military affairs with second and third. So we're not fighting only war which is in the third revolution, but there's a warfare which is maneuver warfare, and net-centric is also taking place at the same time. It's a convergence of tactics, operation, art, and strategy, because of the extreme non-linearity I've spoken about. So at all type of elements, this is being done. Elements is being fought. So it's going to converge old and new domains of warfare. When I say new domains in cyber, space, electromagnetic spectrum, cognitive, with old domains like land, sea, and maritime domain. It's going to converge time and space, both of them. So these are the kind of changes which may foresee in the future. And along with it, so what did we see? Did we see elements of this or green shoots of this in Operation Sindoor? Yes, and to us, I would say that this was the kind of first non-contact warfare which we fought. We didn't see each other. We saw it either at radars or at different ranges, except for what was happening on the line of control. And it was a mix of kinetic and non-kinetic. When I say non-kinetic, that happened in the information domain, that happened in the cyber domain, and of course there was a kinetic operation where destruction was being caused to each other. it was also non-linear in nature. So there's something happening on the line of control and something happening as far back as Noor Khan or Sargodha. So at huge distances from the border, simultaneously, non-linearity. It was networked, means at least the defensive part of it. You must have read about it, that we had networked our air defense architecture of the Air Force and the Army and the maritime air defense architecture, Trigun, Akash Tir and IACCS into, so that they could give one comprehensive kind of a picture. So you can provide a layered kind of event. So better information, faster information available to our side. We had also tried to kind of network our counter US system, which were countering drones. Not so much, but some kind of, in this 7, 10, 15 days, we were able to do that. So that I think, it was also multi-domain. The first time means we were using warfare was in maritime, land, air, cyber, space, electromagnetic spectrum. Means all this electronic warfare battalions which are deployed, which are said with counter US systems, they're able to negate that kind of a threat which are coming in from Pakistan. So this was happening there. And some green shoots of even an intelligent kind of warfare. So how AI can be used to do some kind of a predictive analysis. So this was happening. And last but not the least of combat, I said there's the four element. The fourth element I talked was about tactics and strategy. How that's getting affected. That's about, I have spoken about in parts. That's about demassification of the battlefield. And yet integration of capabilities of diverse nature. It's leading to ultimate non-linearity and defenses in depth. I've spoken about vulnerability of large platforms and static establishments, and I've talked about importance of deception over surprise. So these are the kind of changes which we'll have to live with in future. In my concluding remarks, I can only say that Operation Sindoor created a kind of a history of sorts as far as air warfare is concerned. Successful operations were carried out against an adversary which was almost equally matched, if you can say. It is not operations against an adversary which had no air force or no air defense worth its salt. So it was against an adversary, and against that, if you are able to carry out relentless operations deep inside with precision and offensive in intent, I think that was a big achievement. And we were able to penetrate those air defense networks with impunity and at will. So history, because I'm saying this is because exhibition of this particular superior air power was demonstrated against someone which already had some good capabilities in this particular field. So that was all I had to say about future warfare and wars. I hope you get a fair idea as to how warfare is evolving. And this particular preparedness of the armed forces is first about by thinking. We should be able to understand where warfare is going so that we can change our tactics, get your equipment profile right, understand, have your organizational structures right, you have your doctrines and concepts right. So in this particular thought process, in this whole, it's not the job of only the armed forces, people like me, or this young generation who are going to be doing this probably after 5 or 10 years, but it's also the role of veterans, the academia. Everyone else, it's the whole of nation, to understand where we are evolving, what's happening, so that we are better prepared as a nation to take on these kind of challenges. Thank you everyone for this patient hearing.
Thank you, sir.
Now I can take on a few questions.
A small request. Yeah. We will have a vote of thanks from 2 questions. Okay. We'll have a question and answer session.
Yeah.
Due to paucity of time, only we will receive 2 questions from the Department of Defense and Strategic student. One from this side and one from that side. So, girls, anyone from this side? Yeah.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your insightful lecture on future wars and warfare. So, my question is, what are the losses incurred or experienced by Pakistani side during Operation Sindoor, and from this, what can be the potential strategic insight we can draw for future conflicts and the evolution of warfare, sir?
Very nice question. You know, when I was asked about losses on our side, I said these are not important. The results and how you act is important. So it would be not very correct to talk about losses, means numbers, etc. Means I'll give a detailed kind of an answer on this. You see in a match, suppose you go into a football match and you win 3-2. He scored 2 goals and you scored 4 goals. So that's an even-sided match. But suppose you go on in a test match, cricket test match, and you win by innings defeat. Then there's no question of how many wickets and how many balls and how many players. It's an innings kind of a defeat. But since there is always this inquisitivity as to the result of your strikes, which was visible, which was more in psychological domain and what was visible to us, all of us, means not to us, to globally, to everyone. So based on technical parameters like electronic intelligence, signal intelligence, at some point of time, we will take out this particular data and share it with us to answer those queries and inquisitiveness of people like you who keep telling me how many aircraft did we destroy, how many radars did we destroy. We will make a rough assessment of that and come out with that shortly.
One last question.
Sir, my name is Om. I am from the Defense Department. So initially, it appeared that Op Sindoor will be a long-drawn conflict. But what made the Pakistani side capitulate so fast and so suddenly?
Please sit. I think in some part I was able to address this. What I said was, from our side, we didn't want to get into a long-drawn kind of a conflict. We've seen our experience in Operation Prakaram. We were there for almost about 9 months. It involves a lot of expenditure, disrupts everything. And we had seen this to some extent after Balakot. You know, there was a deployment which we had mobilized. So in this particular case, what happened was, before this mobilization could be completed, the operations was halted. Of course, Operation Sindoor, as you know, is not over as yet. It continues. It's a temporary cessation of hostilities. There's a need to keep our guard up. So this, I think, is important. But as far as the Pakistani side is concerned, I can make a guess, 2 guesses. That is, one, that they were losing things faster at a very, very long distance. And they thought that if this continued for some more time, they're likely to lose more. And hence, they picked up the telephone. Second thing, give the enemy also, your adversary, due. He had also attempted a large number of attacks on 10th, starting from 1 o'clock till about 9:30, 10. Huge number of attacks. They continued subsequently also. And he would have assumed that some of them are as successful as Indians have been. Of course, that didn't happen. And he had no way to realize this. Like in the initial stages also, when we are hitting very deep, I'm not talking about the first day. On 7th, we had ensured that we had all kind of imageries. But when it's a dynamic war, then we really did not know, okay, what is the effect on Sargodha, what is the effect on Murid, what is the effect on Bulari, so what is the effect on Jacobabad. It's after once you get a satellite imagery. So the first few hours, you're not very sure. Of course, we were all aided by Pakistanis themselves because they were putting up things in the social media, so we had some idea of its success. But we had to wait for confirmation from satellite imageries and other sources, let's say signal intelligence or otherwise. So we were quite sure. They were also not sure. They must be hoping that they've also done similar kind of a damage. But probably their hopes were belied after 3 or 4 days when they would have searched the satellite imageries from whichever countries they're buying from, that they've not done. So by the time it was too late. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.